We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. This passage in 2 Corinthians 10 has always been in the back of my mind. It's taught a lot, but I don't think I fully understood it until earlier this year when I read a couple of articles on it that really went into digging into it. And I think also just the place I am in my life, learning a lot more about faith and belief. And so it really began to make a lot of sense. And so that's what I want to talk about today on this episode of Taking Your Dominion, the weekly discussion about on earth as it is in heaven and our role in making it happen. Earlier in this chapter in 2 Corinthians, Paul says this, "For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does." Pretty fascinating statement. And for those of us that live in the physical world, it actually doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We have to fight these physical things, right? We have to go to work, we have to fight traffic, argue and get through relationships with other people. There are things that are practical that really come against us. And this seems to be saying, yeah, don't worry about any of those. Just don't even look at those as difficulties. Don't even try to overcome them. Just, I don't even know what it really is trying to say, right? But I think this is how we often approach this. And so we read through this passage as if that's some lofty goal that we can never attain to. It really doesn't hold much in terms of what we do on a day-to-day basis. And then it says, we don't wage war as the world does. So what? Yeah, it's kind of confusing. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. As a believer who lives in the real world, this also doesn't inspire much hope, because it seems to say that the Bible and God and Christianity really don't have anything to offer me in terms of how to overcome the challenges of life, because, the weapons that we have aren't really any good against those. They aren't the same as everyone else, and so, it's pretty confusing. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. Okay, so I like the divine power part and also demolishing strongholds. But again, it seems really heavenly minded and not much earthly useful. But something clicked and changed in me when I read the passage that I started with today, earlier this year. So I want to read it again. "We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ." What clicked in me when I read the passage was that what we're fighting against isn't the things of the world, it's our perspective on what's going on in the world. It's the perspective, it's the bad arguments, it's the pretensions that set themselves up against the knowledge of God. The knowledge of God is the key here. Another translation reads this way, "Casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ." Everything that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. And suddenly it clicked. Everything is exalting itself against the knowledge of God. What we are battling against are the things that try to convince us that God does not exist. So our car breaks down and we think, God's not going to take care of me. The mortgage is due and we lose our job. See, God maybe doesn't really exist, or I wouldn't have these problems. These things are imaginations. They are things that exalt themselves up against the knowledge of God. What do I mean by that? I mean the authority and the truth and the verified truth of God's word, that He'll never leave us and forsake us. He'll always take care of us. He'll always come through. And He does. But this is about the knowledge of those things and remembering those things. It's about being in alignment with God and His word by faith. We don't war against the things of this world in the way the world does, because the world doesn't have the faith in God. But we do. We have divine power to destroy these misperceptions, these misconceptions that we walk around with about the world and our place in it and our God. Is He real or not? Will He take care of us or not? We have divine power to overcome them. The Bible's very clear about not living in fear. But this is about how do we do that? Well, we have to demolish the arguments against God. God said this, and circumstances look like it's going the opposite direction, but we know that the knowledge of God says this, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. What do we do with captives in war, in a war situation? We sit them in a chair, we shine a spotlight in their face, and then we ask them lots of questions. What are you doing here? Who sent you? What are you after? What are your purposes? Are you a good guy or a bad guy? We take every thought captive, and the ones that are already obedient to Christ, God's word, we keep those. The ones that aren't, we get rid of them. We have to figure out, okay, am I thinking right? right or not? Am I thinking in alignment with God's word, God's kingdom, God's ways? We need to recognize that what we're really fighting against is fear and insecurities and the unknown. And that's really what this passage is all about. By faith, we have weapons that will help us to continue to live by faith and with faith in God. And that allows us to approach and experience life a totally different way, the way that we're called and invited to live. This just shows it. He's given us weapons to live at peace and in faith with Him on this earth. So I hope that helps as you move forward, and I hope that you've enjoyed this episode of Taking Your Dominion, the weekly discussion about on earth as it is in heaven, and our role in making that happen. And today, our role in making that happen is to make sure that our thoughts are in line with God's Word. Thanks.